Now moving on to the hard aspect combination of Jupiter and Pluto. I consider Jupiter-Pluto to be a very powerful combination in astrology because Jupiter has to do with the expansion of our vital force and Pluto has to do with the abnormal growth and the abnormal expansion of anything that it's in aspect with. Therefore, the hard aspect of Jupiter and Pluto has to do with an abnormal expansion of our vital power. And usually when it comes to combinations with Pluto, they tend to lean into more of a negative or challenging direction. But when it comes to the hard aspects combination of Jupiter and Pluto, that tends to be an overwhelmingly positive combination astrologically speaking. One of the things that this combination is most overwhelmingly positive for is for the acquisition of wealth. And the reason for that is because Jupiter is a god of wealth, but Pluto, being a god of the underworld, is also associated with inexplicable wealth that is held within the core of the earth. Therefore, when we see these two planets in hard aspect combination, this oftentimes has to do with an expansion of our wealth potential, and it is one of the combinations that we associate with extraordinary wealth and financial acumen within this lifetime. The combination of Jupiter and Pluto is something that we find within the charts of bankers or people who are working for a hedge fund and anyone who's having to navigate extraordinary wealth within this lifetime. As a matter of fact, Jupiter and Pluto in hard aspect is the specific combination that we associate with plutocracies or governments based on wealth. Historically speaking, when we think about plutocracies, we think about the Medici family, which was the ruling class in Renaissance Italy, where when Italy had no established sovereign government of its own, they relied on the Medici family to provide them the monetary means by which to govern and run their country. Therefore, when we think about plutocracies, we think about people who have the combination of Jupiter and Pluto in hard aspects within their charts, because very often those people are having the ability to attain the sort of financial resources necessary in order for them to have an upper hand within society. One of the challenging things that we find with Jupiter and Pluto in hard aspect is that these people can sometimes be overly associated with the physical things that they have within their lives. And when I think about this, I think about the king Midas, who asked the gods to give him the ability to turn everything that he touched into gold. And so Jupiter and Pluto is a powerful combination for the acquisition of wealth, but a big part of that is that it can also lock us into a form of materialistic consciousness where all we think about is the physical manifestations of power that we have within our lives through our belongings. And so sometimes Jupiter and Pluto in hard aspect can also be a combination of gluttony and greed, because this combination can sometimes manifest within the charts of people who deeply identify themselves with their possessions and their belongings. The combination of Jupiter and Pluto in hard aspects can sometimes cause a person to overly cling onto their idea of what they own, and it can cause them to only know themselves through the things they own. Therefore, whenever any great calamity occurs within their lives, where they find themselves losing everything, it can genuinely feel as if they are losing a very real part of their own physical bodies because they've become so deeply identified with their possessions within this lifetime. So one of the things that the person with Jupiter and Pluto can really try to work on understanding is the genuine value of life itself. Because very often the value that they ascribe to life is a value that comes from material acquisition. So understanding what is most valuable, not just in life in general, but also what is most qualitatively valuable within their own lives becomes a very important way for them to navigate their own relationship to the things they possess within this lifetime. Now, positively, Jupiter and Pluto is a wonderful combination because it also has to do with generational wealth. And when a person has Jupiter and Pluto, they oftentimes can think about future generations that are going to rely on the impact that they have within this present lifetime. The Jupiter-Pluto person is a person who has the ability to think not just about their own well-being, but also to think about the well-being of their descendants. And so we oftentimes find Jupiter-Pluto people working in fields such as real estate or insurance or banking, or something that gives them a very real sense of stability that can be passed down generationally to the family members who are going to follow them after they are no longer here. Therefore, we may not necessarily need to think of Jupiter-Pluto as an overly materialistic combination, because sometimes that same potency that leads them towards being materialistic on a physical level could also be the same urge within themselves to make sure that others around them are well taken care of. So Jupiter-Pluto is the combination that we find within the charts of people who are going to make sure that they are working extraordinarily well, and that the things that they're creating within this lifetime are operating on a level that is its absolute utmost in terms of success, so that they can support their own family members as well as other people who depend on them. One of the greatest things that I think exists within the combination of Jupiter and Pluto is this idea of people with this combination creating generational wealth. And we find this oftentimes within families where the founder of that family was somebody who struggled to attain financial success, but they created a level of financial success that was able to be passed on generationally even after they were long dead and gone. So the combination of Jupiter-Pluto is something that we find within the charts of people who have this understanding that they're not going to be here forever, but they want to create something that can last a lifetime, and they want to create something that can feel like a legacy, that can continue to live on, and that can continue to support others even when they themselves are no longer here. So while this combination can tend to lead a person down the path of hoarding or clinging on to life, it's also a fabulous combination in terms of somebody realizing that the things that they attain and that the things that they acquire within this lifetime will go beyond them when they're no longer here in order to support the ones they love the most.